John Law was a murderer. Actually, that's the least interesting thing about him. In April 1694, in the middle of a London square, Law stood back to back with a man named Edward Bow Wilson. They turned, they drew, and Law put a bullet in him. One shot, dead. It was a duel over a woman, or at least that's what the messy court records suggest. Law was caught, thrown in Newgate prison, and sentenced to hang. End of story, right? Just another 17th century hothead who threw his life away. Except Law didn't hang. He climbed a prison wall, bribed the right people, and vanished into the European fog. I was looking at these old transcriptions of the hue and cry posters from that year, and the authorities described him as a very tall, black, lean man. He was a fugitive on the run for decades, but while he was hiding, he wasn't sitting in cellars. He was in the high-stakes casinos of Amsterdam, Paris, and Venice. He was a professional gambler, and this is where it gets weird. Law wasn't just lucky, he was a math nerd before that was a thing. He spent 20 years staring at gambling tables and realized something that makes my brain hurt when I think about how simple it is. He noticed that the entire world was stagnant because everyone was obsessed with gold. Gold is heavy, it's slow, it stays in a box. To Law, that was like trying to run a marathon with lid shoes. He had this theory: money isn't a thing, it's an idea. It's a tool to make things move. I don't think he intended to become the most dangerous man in financial history. I think he just wanted to prove his math was right. He wanted to take the biggest gamble ever recorded, replacing every gold coin in a kingdom with pieces of paper. He just needed a victim, a country so broke, so desperate, that they'd listen to a murderer with a deck of cards. And in 1715, he found France. So Law arrives in France in 1715. Perfect timing. Louis XIV, the Sun King, the guy who built Versailles and basically invented the concept of living beyond your means, had just died. He left behind a 5-year-old heir and a debt so massive it's hard to even wrap your head around. I was looking at some estimates last night. We're talking about 2 billion livres. To put that in perspective, the state's annual income was about 145 million. The math doesn't work. It's like trying to pay off a mortgage on a mansion while working a part-time job. France was paralyzed. There was no gold moving. People were hoarding coins under their floorboards because they didn't trust the government, and honestly, who could blame them? Every few years, the crown would literally clip the edges of the coins to make new money. It was a mess. This is where Law walks in. He meets the Duke of Orleans, who's the regent, the guy actually running the show. Now, I'm still not entirely sure if Law was a visionary genius or just the world's most confident conman. He told the Duke exactly what he wanted to hear. He didn't talk about taxes or cutting spending, that's boring. Law talked about velocity. He told the Duke, the problem isn't that France is poor, the problem is that your money is stagnant. It's a clogged pipe. Law's speech was revolutionary. He said, let me open a bank. We'll issue paper notes. The notes will be backed by the king's taxes, but here's the kicker. We'll make them better than gold. How? Well, gold value fluctuates. Law promised that his paper notes would always represent a fixed amount of value. It sounds dry, but in 1716, this was like someone explaining the internet to a medieval peasant. Wait, let's look at this from a different angle. Why would anyone trade a gold coin, something you can melt down, something that is physically valuable, for a piece of paper signed by a Scottish fugitive? Because the Duke made it the law. You had to pay your taxes in Law's paper notes. Suddenly, everyone needed them. The clogged pipe started to clear. The economy actually began to breathe. People were buying bread again. Businesses were opening. For a second there, it looked like Law had actually performed a miracle. But Law had a second act. A much bigger, much scarier act. He knew that paper money only works as long as people believe in the tomorrow. So, he gave them something to believe in. He created the Mississippi Company. He basically pointed at a map of the Louisiana swamp and told the French public, see that? That's not a mosquito-infested marsh, that's a mountain of gold, and if you buy my shares with my paper money, you'll all be gods. I have seen the marketing brochures he printed. They were pure fiction. But France was so desperate to be rich again that they didn't just believe him, they fought each other for the chance to be scammed. By 1719, John Law wasn't just a banker, he was the sun and the moon in the French sky. The share prices of his Mississippi Company were doing things that shouldn't be possible. They went from 500 livres to 10,000. People were getting rich so fast it actually changed the language. This is where we get the word millionaire. It wasn't a compliment back then, it was a description of someone who had caught the law fever. I was reading about a lady who instructed her carriage driver to accidentally tip her over in front of Law's house. She just wanted to talk to him when he helped her up. That's the level of desperation we're talking about. But here's the twist, the one that keeps me up. While everyone was staring at the stock charts, nobody was looking at the actual ships, because the ships weren't bringing back gold. They weren't bringing back anything. The company wasn't making a single livre of profit. It was a closed loop. Law was printing money so people could buy shares, and the shares going up made people want more money. Hold on, let's be real for a second. Law knew, he had to know, he was a math guy. He knew that if everyone tried to cash out at once, the whole thing would vanish like a ghost. The first crack didn't come from a peasant, it came from a prince. The Prince of Conti got pissed off at Law over some stock deal and sent 3 wagons to Law's bank. He demanded they be filled with gold in exchange for his paper. Law complied, he had to, but the sight of those wagons, heavy and real, sent a chill through Paris. The question started to whisper through the cafes. If the prince wants out, why am I still in? Law tried to fight the panic with more paper. He printed and printed until the ink probably didn't have time to dry. He thought he could outprint the fear. He was wrong. By 1720, the money was dying. I found a record of a guy who went to buy a loaf of bread with a 1,000 livre note, something that could have bought a house a year earlier, and the baker just laughed at him. The paper was worth less than the wood in the baker's oven. The riot started. People weren't sleeping in the streets to buy stock anymore. They were dying in the streets trying to get their gold back. Law, the man who saved France, was now the man who had stolen its soul. He had to leave. And this is the part that feels like a bad movie script, but it's real. He reportedly escaped Paris, disguised as a woman, hodled, listening to the crowd scream about how they wanted to tear him apart. He ended up in Venice. I spent some time looking into his final years. He didn't have a secret stash of gold. He died in 1729, broke, still obsessed with his charts, trying to explain to anyone in the casinos that his system would have worked if only people hadn't lost their nerve. France didn't forget. They stayed terrified of paper money for a century. They went back to gold, back to the clogged pipes, and the resulting economic stagnation. It didn't just stay in the banks, it fed the hunger that eventually burned down the Bastille. I'm not saying John Law caused the French Revolution, that's too simple, but he showed people that wealth could be a lie. And honestly, looking at the way we handle debt today, the way we print trillions to keep the wheels turning, I don't think we ever actually fixed the problem Law created. We just got better at ignoring the wagons. I wonder if Law was right. Maybe money is just a collective hallucination, but it only works as long as everyone stays asleep. I'd appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel to show your support.